Hello.
Hi, Richard. I
Yes.
think you're the only ones really connected to the meeting. Other ones are.
Yeah, I was going to say it looks calm so far.
Yeah, I don't expect a big crowd. But Karsten for sure.
Right. Yes.
And we settled down for the usual starting time of 3 or 4 past.
Yeah, good to give some margin. Try to do the same for the reading group and other things that people may trickle in gradually. Yeah, so yeah. So they sent out the info for the open house. But let's see if someone more joins. Give some minutes, I suppose.
Yeah. It is the right meeting. You can also see the URI.
Yeah, and I came. Yeah.
Oh, there it is, Karsten. Hi, Karsten.
Karsten, if you're trying to say something, at least I can't hear anything.
Same.
Hello.
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 Better now.
Yes.
Let's wait 1 or 2 minutes more, but I have the impression we're going to be a very small group today.
Right.
Yeah, unfortunately, Christian had to excuse himself.
Yeah.
So for information, Karsten, it seemed they fixed the issue I reported on Miteco about the refresh button for the slides.
Good.
Not visible now. Now I can see it. Yeah.
Let me check whether I still can see it. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, you could already last time. The problem
Yeah,
was on
but
my
maybe they
side.
fixed it for you and broke it for me. That would be the normal thing to do for a software engineer. But yeah.
Well, they are great. At every meeting, I reach out to Alessandro, I think, and I always give them compliment on their service. They're great, I think.
Yeah, I'm not complaining at all. It's just important that we check things and don't fall into the traps when we actually need it.
Okay, I'm waiting to see 5 past in my clock. Out of scrupulous. Okay, there we are. So, well, let's get started. Hi, everyone. This is the interim meeting of the co-working group. I'm Marco Tiloca, my co-chairs are Jaime Jimenez and Carsten Bormann. And since this is an official IETF meeting, the not well applies. Take care of understanding that. Please be nice with one another. It's also and especially about code of conduct, not only about IPR, patents, and so on. So the agenda for today is about mainly 2 items. CoreConf, both CoreSeed and CoreComai, and non-traditional responses about which we were expecting a discussion, especially from Christian, but we have some material if we want to have an early discussion at least, and that can continue at the next interim, for example. Anything more or any bashing? Otherwise, we can go for this. Okay. Karsten, then we can start with CoreConf. I quickly skimmed your slides before.
Yeah. So I was hoping we were going to have a nice discussion about core responses, so I tried not to take the whole time. So I only have 9 slides, I think. So I think everybody here is aware of the fact that we have these 4 documents, one of which is an RFC, one is has been in ISG processing and has been pushed back to the working group, which is called SID. One is in working group last call past stage, but since we decided to make one significant simplifying round at this and one more that has reached working group last call past a couple of years ago, but probably needs to ingest all the changes that have happened in the landscape. So I want to talk about core SID and core COMI today because, well, Yang was out there, and I quickly talk about Yang at the end. And Yang Library is maybe too early to do the finishing touches on. I mean, the main work has been done. So talking about core SID. Core SID is really about allocation of Yang SIDs that are needed for Yang to get its full efficiency. And this is an interesting thing because it's pioneering allocation of identifiers over a large flat space. So people who needed large spaces have done this hierarchically before that, and we're trying to do this in a flat space. And that's interesting. We think we've nailed it, but yeah, we had some minor issues here with the need for status information in the files we use to record this allocation. So this is what needed to be done to get core SID 20. And then we found that the tool we used to generate the examples, Pyang, actually didn't quite do what we think it did. So what we really need to do now, and what we have been needed, what we needed to do for 3 months now and haven't gotten to, is running a patched up Pyang to generate the SID file example in the document. And the special thing here is that we probably don't want to disrupt all the people that actually are using the existing SID file allocation. So we are actually going to use the existing SID file as input to Pyang, which is something that it can do. So we don't want to renumber the numbers that may be used in other documents as examples. But we have to make sure that all the relevant SIDs are now in there, and this means not just SIDs for data items, but also SIDs that describe specific points in the data tree that are not normally directly being exchanged. Only subtrees of that are being exchanged. So there is some uncertainty here. And of course, in the end, we want Pyang to emit the complete set. But on the other hand, this example file doesn't have to be completely right, because we can always add things later, even if this is a bit painful. So this is where we are. And just to remind you what this means is we already have numbers like 1715 to 1719, which are data identifiers that point into the example that we were using, the IETF system module. And we have to fix those a little bit, because Yang didn't output the full string here. It should have said /input and /output for RPCs. But it also left out a point in the tree, the 171 star here, that it probably should have, because in the end you may want to use a SID for that, even if it's not a daily occurrence. There's also a little bit editorial work that is needed, because what SID really does is it defines a process that everybody can use. But it doesn't necessarily mean everybody has to follow exactly that process. And we now have an example for the appearance SID allocation document has a slightly different way of doing the allocation. So there will be a document there that describes how to do the allocation. And what we need is a couple of sentences that say that alternative processes are acceptable as long as the objectives, which fortunately we have documented, are still addressed. So the whole section 2 of CORE-SID tells us what those objectives are. And if you come up with an alternate process that actually fulfills these objectives, but also fulfills objectives that this specific allocation has, and the appearance people have some very specific requirements on the space they use, you can use that alternative process. So that's one thing that has to be written up, probably with Laurent and the other people who are doing this work. So this is what needs to be done, and the timeline that I see is we can do those process exception edits. We can do them in parallel with the PYang work. So one of Laurent's students, I think, has a fork of PYang that does more useful things here, and we may be able to leverage that. And based on these two, we should prepare -21 and discuss this on the list, and maybe on the next interim, even though that now is starting to fill up. And my objective is to have a working group last call in that same week where the interim is, so that the working group last call is completed before IETF 117 starts. And then we can do any necessary further discussion at 170 and submit to ISG again. So the changes are not big, but they are significant.
Karsten, the timeline looks good, by the way. I think in the original plan, we weren't expecting yet another working group last call. It will be the fourth one, but looks appropriate.
Yeah, when I don't remember who did this, but when whoever is managing this on the ISG side, sorry, I forget, looked at this, they decided that it's better to fully push this back into the working group, and maybe doing a working group call is a reasonable way. I mean, the chairs can always declare consensus, but if I were chair on this, I'm not, because I'm an author, I would probably think I don't have a good basis for declaring consensus, so let's do a working group call.
I think it's good to have one more, all considering also what you presented. If you check the current status right now, after all the dance we had with Eric, is saying waiting for working group chair, go ahead. So we put the status like after we passed and intended last call. So we just have to revert it farther back. Okay. But that's fine. I'd just like to confirm with Jaime, who is also shepherd.
Right.
I think we can definitely go for this.
Yeah. So I didn't say whether this is a 2-week working group last call or a 1-week working group last call. You get to decide that. But I think actually having a proper working group last call on this one is a good thing. And I think we even have time for a 2-week working group last call.
2 weeks is good, and even 1 week could pass the cutoff anyway. So why not just giving more time for better and more comments? Yeah. Sounds good. Thanks.
Good. So this is the plan for CORE-SID. Now let's talk about COMAI. We had a pretty important discussion at the London IETF where we at the hackathon said that this is all great, but it's just too complicated. We need to reduce the complexity. And so I started doing some complexity reduction, but then I think Christian came with the idea to maybe simplify this significantly, because we do have fetch and patch, which we didn't have when this originally was designed. So we can use those to simplify things. And then the question was, how radical are we? And I think we now have converged on the non-radical solution. So we don't we don't use get output for accessing individual parts of the tree, but we keep get put and delete for whole data store access. So I'm personally, I just don't know enough about Yang to know when whole data store access makes sense, but several people have told me they would like to use that. So let's keep that in. So today I merged the branch that has all those changes and submitted it as a dash 13. So it was on the GitHub repository all the time, but maybe it needs to be advertised more openly. And this means we now have an official internet draft that we can discuss on the list. And if there is any need for discussion, maybe even at the interim, there are two little wildcards in there. One is, there is a SID file example in there, and one question is, do the pyang changes we do for core SID actually impact this SID file as well? I don't think so, but we need to check with Yang experts. And the other observation is that this SID file is for a module that uses RC Yang data, which we actually replaced by SX structure in the other drafts. And maybe we need to check whether this is needed here as well. So I fired off a question to Rob Wilton, who suggested replacing RC Yang data by SX structure in core SID. If all this works out, we should be able to do working group last call approximately at the same time we do the one for core SID, or even earlier if we get all these questions answered quickly, because yeah, we don't really want to change very much in the simplified version anymore. And again, we should be in a position to discuss the outcome of the working group last call at 1:17 and submit to the ISG.
Yes, and it's great to run them in parallel. And here we also have the shepherd already appointed. It's Michael Richardson.
Good. Okay, so we need to tell him what we discussed today. And finally, just a further outlook, a look into the crystal ball. As I said, we may want to finish Yang library. Again, check whether this is the right level of complexity for what we're trying to do here. And the other thing that people are banging on our doors about is the fact that even with Yang Sibor as the container representation format, the actual data that the Yang model is about are still like in an XML document. So they are all text-based. We have text-based IP addresses, and that really hurts for IPv6. We have text-based dates and so on. And it probably would be a good thing if we had a way to switch an existing Yang model to a more efficient representation, but nobody knows how to do that. So this is going to be a design effort and not just a slam dunk, let's write this up and standardize it. So the question, of course, is how do you handle the fact that new binary formats are going to come in, and how does the evolution work with potentially different players being at different levels of evolution on this. So this is the hard part, and I'm just saying this so it doesn't seem like we are completely done. I think we are in a very good shape, but doing this will really unlock the power of Yang for a few more things that we might want to do. So this is what I had prepared.
Thank you very much. Looks under control. Okay. Yeah, I have no other comments or questions really. Looking forward for next steps in 2 weeks latest.
Yeah.
And okay, we can touch non-traditional responses. And again, Christian was very useful to have today about that. Without him, the few things I have in mind are his high-level question on the list that I replied to. So I confirm I'm still on the same idea. And you had some quick reaction to my review, Karsten. But yeah, I understand it may need time to be digested. Otherwise, I think you wrote the objectives for today in the notes. Yeah, you did. We can still go through them if you want. And again, we can bring this up for the next meeting anyway.
Yeah, so it seems to me we have had some feedback that this unifying approach is probably a good thing. So this is the ecosystem thing. So when we designed CoAP like 13 years ago or so, we always had an architecture blueprint in the form of HTTP and had a pretty good idea which part of the baggage we would want to lose and which other parts were essential for what we are trying to do. But with these different ways of doing security and multicast and configured, observe, and so on, we are now going beyond that blueprint. So it's probably a good idea to actually write up another blueprint, in particular with respect to the way we have been using responses, like the multicast responses, the responses to multicast requests and the yeah, I'm still falling in the same trap. And the notifications that come to observe requests, they are part of this bigger picture, and they actually are innovations that we did at the time without having the big picture. So that's one aspect, writing up that big picture, essentially writing up an architecture. The other thing that this document actually does is it defines a few options. And these have had very little review. I'm not aware of implementations of them. Some of them just show one way of doing things, mostly to illustrate the architecture, not necessarily to be finalized versions of options that we actually want to introduce. So when we discuss what is this a normative document or not, we should consider that we probably want to extract these normative parts anyway. Maybe not do all of them at the same point in time. Maybe apply some more thinking. Does it really make sense to provide a count of additional responses you receive, which this leisure for responses option does? So that's really something that's better discussed in with support from implementations and from interoperability experience. So I think this might have a sufficiently different timeline from the architecture parts that it may be the best way to handle this by doing the architecture in an informational document, and then do one or more normative documents that just define these options. But again, we need these options to actually illustrate the architecture. So this is a bit of a difficult situation to have illustrations in here that aren't actually meant for consumption as a normative document. So best case, we will do all this quickly enough together that we don't need that and can just point from this document to the normative ones. Or we might want to put in the illustrative options with a big caveat, folks. This is really just showing the idea. And no, there won't be TBDs for that, because the option numbers will be defined for the real options and not these illustration options. So that would be my answer to the second, third item on the objectives. And looking at next steps, well, we need to have a discussion about several things, including the terminology questions that I raised today. But yeah, we can certainly start doing that on the mailing list. And Marco, thank you for the detailed review. So we of course also can implement some of the comments there. So I have started making a few changes on the GitHub repository. So that can all happen in parallel, but we have to have these discussions, and we probably have...
Richard, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in with a quick comment. I don't have any detailed feedback, but I do think this unifying approach makes sense. And I'll try to get updated a bit in more depth before this discussion on the list starts, or if this is taken up again in the next interim.
Thank you. I was saying, at least personally, I don't find the terminology confusing, especially multicast responses. To me means a response sent over multicast, irrespective of how the request was. So I don't know if multicast sent response is clearer and better. To me, it becomes a bit more cumbersome.
Yeah, so that's always the problem with terminology. If you put the definition in the term, then it's no longer usable. So you always have to make some abbreviation. And I'm just noticing that I trip up on this all the time, and that may just be a function of my age, or it may be maybe an indication that we should further improve the terminology. And I also had this comment on configured requests versus phantom requests, which essentially are all in the same class, but when we use the term configured, we probably should limit it to the cases where there's actual configuration going on, and have another term for the whole set of non-traditionally transmitted requests.
Also, I think the overall strategy you had in mind before is good, meaning having the architecture informative. It's about acknowledging that things are broader than originally imagined. Somehow documents popped up thinking that way, so let's just flood the ground to have a common understanding. And yeah, that sounds like informative. Well, the options are another story. Agree. I had the impression from a quick chat from Christian that he had in mind yet another possible option, actually, quite similar in scope to the option multicast timeout defined in GroupCom proxy. So that option is very explicit and tells the proxy, send me back multiple responses to this same request for X seconds, then stop. Christian had in mind, well, something similar, but with no fixed indication in terms of seconds and so on. More on from now on until I tell you otherwise. Send me back multiple responses.
Yeah, so we would need a way to deactivate these things.
Exactly, it really works, switch on and off. And I wasn't understanding exactly about the use case or so. And he had something in mind. He talked of a case where you have a client, a proxy, a group of servers. Say you have group of score end-to-end between client and servers. Then you have OSCore between the client and the proxy that you would use to protect for the proxy multicast timeout. And my original thought was, if you had yet another proxy in between the client and the proxy I mentioned before, that to make things work, you'd add an outer version of multicast timeout for that proxy. And Christian would like to avoid that, if I understood correctly, in the interest of privacy. So for that second proxy, you help instead to have a more generic and less detailed option, just telling that proxy, trust me, go ahead with this multiple forwarding until I tell you. If I understood the use case correctly, which is pretty advanced.
I understood the same. It needs some additional signaling, but it's like a privacy preserving, just saying that, yes, multiple responses are to be sent, but you need some additional signaling to indicate when to stop that process, basically.
Yeah, so we have this weird way in which we deactivate get requests with the observe option. So maybe we have to look at that again and see whether that generalizes.
Thanks. I think Christian also mentioned that to avoid introducing yet another option, he considered observe and then found a caveat so that it made that not working or less convenient. So that's why he started to think to a new option altogether. But yeah, we should double check.
Yeah, I'm talking about the way observe works, not necessarily actually using the observe option.
Okay.
But observe essentially solves two problems. One is the deactivation, and the other is the indication of order, which may not be of interest here. I don't know.
Mm. I think I covered all the points in the notes and that you mentioned. Yeah. So yeah, we really need Christian to discuss more. Unless you wanted to go already through my review, but I don't think so. Okay, but let's say that we can continue with this, well, on the list for sure for everyone, and on the next meeting, where as a placeholder, I was thinking already of something that we were hoping to cover today already and couldn't work for John, meaning especially that issue on attacks on co-op. So if you checked some mails, Karsten, looks like it worked for John. I just wanted Christian to confirm, and I suppose it's fine if he can attend the meeting altogether. So in 2 weeks, we may have, well, CoreConf again, non-traditional responses, attack on co-op, and I don't know if you heard from Martine about DNS over co-op. Not yet. Okay. Somehow I think they can all fit to some extent if all of them are confirmed, but maybe we should try to not add more.
Yeah, that will be a pack meeting then.
Yeah. Okay. Then I think we covered everything we had in mind for today, and I don't see any new participant joining.
So shall we try to schedule a side meeting at 1:17? Shall we do this outside of 1:17?
Oh, well, if we manage with the time zones, yes, even during the IETF week, we can make it. I think we need to have the final IETF agenda before starting to juggle. But in principle, yes. So I have the impression that me, Ricard, and Martine, if you had in mind something very extended, will be on site.
Yes,
Mhm.
I'm on site. I would
Yeah.
join the side meeting too, of course, depending on when it fits to place it.
But yeah, it should be doable.
We have had unofficial side meetings for a long time in the core working group. So the main problem is setting up things like audio and possibly video in a way that remote participation kind of works. And since quite a few people will not be on site, that's maybe interesting. But yeah, I think the high bandwidth communication, where I think Marco and Rika, you two probably have ways of having high bandwidth communication.
Hopefully.
Or do you only ever meet at IETF meetings like?
Oh no.
We're in the next rooms right now, so we have plenty of bandwidth. Yeah.
Yeah, I once had an office mate that I met at IETFs more often than in my office.
No,
Okay.
it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Let's arrange one.
Yeah, we probably need to reserve a room before everything is gone. So I can have a look.
That also comes around the time when they share guidelines for booking test sessions for chairs and so on. So I'll also keep a look at that. Okay. There's nothing else. For the people we are around, was a productive meeting, I think. And thank you very much, Ricard, for helping with the notes.
No problem. Yeah.
Okay. Talk to you soon. Have a
Talk to
good
you
day.
soon.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.